Hey everyone, Elizabeth here. The Last Laugh delivers stories that leave you speechless. If you're here for it, hit subscribe and let's go.
My name is Priya Nair, and for most of my life the story my family told about me was simple. Divya was the smart one. Divya got the grades that made my parents call their friends. Divya got the trophies displayed on the living room shelf, the ones my mother would gesture toward when relatives visited. Divya was the plan. I was the variable. The second daughter who was, as my mother liked to say, resilient, adaptable, someone who would land on her feet. It took me a long time to understand that "she'll be fine" is not the same as love. Took me longer to stop needing it to be. We grew up in Fremont, California, in a house that smelled like cardamom and ambition. My father, Suresh Nair, was a civil engineer who had built his career on precision and logic, and he applied that same logic to his daughters. Divya was the return on investment. I was the hedge. I don't say this with bitterness anymore. I used to. Now I say it the way you describe weather, accurately without expecting it to change retroactively. Divya is 2 years older than me and genuinely brilliant. That part was always true. She tested well, spoke confidently, charmed teachers the way some people charm dogs, instinctively without trying. I was different. I was quieter. I read obsessively, built things, took apart the family computer and reassembled it when I was 11. My father called it fiddling. My mother called it that phase. My sister called it embarrassing when her friends came over. What I was doing, though I didn't have the vocabulary for it then, was learning systems. How things connected. How data moved. How patterns revealed themselves if you were patient enough to look. I was patient. By high school I had taught myself 3 programming languages, built a rudimentary inventory management tool for a local Indian grocery store, for free just to see if I could, and quietly won a regional data science competition that my parents didn't attend because Divya had a dance recital the same afternoon. I didn't tell them I'd won until a week later. My mother said, "That's wonderful, Beta," and returned to the conversation she'd been having about Divya's college applications. I got used to that rhythm. The scholarship was called the Hartley Patel Fellowship. It was named after Professor Gerald Hartley, a data science professor at UC Berkeley who ran a private research fellowship for undergraduate students. 5 spots per year, full funding, guaranteed research publication, and a direct pipeline to the best graduate programs in the country. It was not widely advertised. You had to be nominated by a faculty member who knew Hartley personally. My AP statistics teacher, Mr. Okonkwo, knew him. He called me into his classroom after school in November of my senior year, sat me down and said, "Priya, I want to nominate you for something. I've only done this twice in 20 years. Please take it seriously." I took it seriously. I spent 3 weeks preparing my application materials. I wrote a research proposal on predictive modeling for urban transit systems. I coded a prototype. I revised the proposal 4 times, then twice more after Mr. Okonkwo reviewed it. It was the best work I had done in my life to that point. I knew it. Mr. Okonkwo knew it. The nomination required a faculty endorsement letter from my high school and a meeting between Professor Hartley and the nominating student's family, a formality he'd maintained for years, a chance to ask questions and explain the commitment. The meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday evening in December. Professor Hartley came to our house. I was upstairs when I heard the doorbell. I was nervous in the way you are nervous about something you actually want. I smoothed my shirt and started down the stairs. I stopped in the doorway. My father was already talking. Divya was sitting at the dining table with her hands folded, in the blouse she wore to temple. My mother was pouring tea. Professor Hartley was nodding. "Divya is the academic one," my father was saying. "Her grades, her dedication. I think you'll find she's exactly what your program is looking for." Professor Hartley glanced up. He saw me in the doorway. There was something in his expression. Not quite surprise, more like a question he didn't ask. My mother noticed me then. "Priya," she said pleasantly, "we were just telling Professor Hartley about Divya. Come sit." My father did not look at me. He continued. "She's been preparing for something like this her whole life." I stood there for exactly 3 seconds. I counted them. Then I smiled, not for them, just to keep my face in a shape I could control, and I went back upstairs. I heard my father's voice continue below. I heard Hartley's polite responses. I heard the click of teacups. Mr. Okonkwo called me the next morning. "Priya," he said, and I could hear in the single word that he already knew. I'm sorry. I don't know how this happened. The nomination was for you. I know, I said. I want you to know that I'll write you any other recommendation you need. Anywhere you want to go. Thank you, I said. I know you will. I did not cry. I had learned early that crying about a thing did not change the thing. Divya was accepted to the Hartley Patel Fellowship. She lasted 14 months before withdrawing, citing stress and a desire to pivot to marketing. Professor Hartley's research group published 3 papers that year. Her name was on none of them. I went to UC San Diego on a partial merit scholarship I secured myself. My parents contributed what they called the reasonable portion, a number they'd clearly calculated against Divya's fellowship funding and found satisfactory. I chose computer science with a concentration in data systems. I did not tell my family when I made Dean's List. I did not tell them when I was hired as a research assistant in my second year, or when that research assistant position turned into a co-authorship credit on a published paper about anomaly detection in financial transaction data. I made a decision somewhere in my first year of college. Not dramatic, not spoken aloud, more like a quiet internal adjustment, the way you shift your grip on something you're carrying. I decided to stop reporting to my family. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. They had a story about me. I was not interested in negotiating with that story. I was interested in writing a different one. I had 2 friends I kept close. The first was James Osei, who I'd met at an orientation hackathon where we'd built a transit optimization model in 48 hours and won honorable mention. James was brilliant and funny and had the particular gift of making you feel that hard work was also interesting, which is rarer than it sounds. The second was Camille Torres, a business student who understood capital structures the way I understood data pipelines, and who would later become the first person I called when I had a company idea I couldn't make disappear. I graduated in 3.5 years. I went directly into a data engineering role at a mid-sized fintech firm in San Francisco. I was good at my job in the specific way that gets noticed without being announced. My models were cleaner, my documentation was better, my instinct for where a system would fail before it failed became something the senior engineers started relying on quietly. In year 2 I was promoted. In year 3 I was running a team. My parents called occasionally. Divya had finished her marketing degree and was working at an agency in Los Angeles. They mentioned her campaigns the way they'd always mentioned her trophies. I listened, said the right things, asked the right questions. I didn't mention my promotion. I wasn't hiding. I was just done asking them to notice. The idea for Meridian Analytics came in the middle of a product failure meeting at my fintech company, where I watched 6 people spend 2 hours arguing about data they didn't understand because the analysis had been structured to confirm assumptions rather than test them. I kept quiet through the meeting. Afterward I called Camille. What if the problem isn't the data? I said. What if the problem is that nobody's built the right tool for people who need to understand data but don't know they're reading it wrong? Camille was quiet for 4 seconds. Keep talking, she said. We spent 6 months talking. Then we spent 4 months building. James joined as our 3rd co-founder, technical lead, and the person who would eventually become my CTO and the best engineering hire I would ever make. We raised a seed round, $2.1 million, from a firm Camille had a relationship with, and we moved into a WeWork in Soma that smelled like ambition and stale coffee. Meridian Analytics was, in its simplest form, a business intelligence platform built for mid-market companies that had data but couldn't use it. We made it elegant. We made it explainable. We made it so that a VP of operations who had never written a line of code could look at their supply chain in real time and understand exactly what was happening and why. Year 1. 11 clients, $800,000 in revenue. Year 2, 43 clients, $4.2 million. Year 3, 180 clients, $18 million. Year 4, we closed a Series B round. $47 million. Our valuation was $180 million. I was 31 years old. I had not told my family. Not out of strategy exactly. It was more that the moment for telling them had never arrived naturally, and I had learned not to force moments. They knew I worked in tech. They knew I was doing fine. My mother occasionally mentioned that I should think about settling down. My father occasionally mentioned that Divya's agency had landed a large account. I listened. I said the right things. There was a cost to this and I want to be honest about it. The cost was not small. There was a Sunday afternoon when Meridian closed the Series B. When James and Camille and I sat in my office with champagne, we didn't open immediately, just held and looked at each other, and I thought about calling my father. Not to prove something. Just because it was a good day and he was my father and that should have been enough. I didn't call. I sat with my assistant Nadia, who had been with me since our seed round and who had watched me build this company from 11 clients to a $180 million valuation, and who had the specific quality of knowing when to say nothing and simply be present. She handed me a glass of water and sat in the chair across from me and said, "You okay?" "I don't know," I said. "That's honest," she said. It was the most I had said to anyone about it in 4 years. I went home that evening and made rice and dal and ate it alone at my kitchen table with a data report open on my laptop and a novel I'd been trying to finish for 3 weeks sitting on the counter. I was fine. I was genuinely fine. But fine and not missing something are different things, and I was self-aware enough to know the difference. That Sunday was, I think, the day I stopped waiting for anything from my family. Not in anger. In acceptance. You can love people and release the expectation that they will see you. Releasing it doesn't make you cold. It makes you free. I hired Nadia full-time at the Series A and gave her the title of Chief of Staff, which she deserved and which she had been functionally performing for 8 months without the title. She ran my schedule with surgical precision and had the gift of reading tone in an email the way some people read faces. She was the one who flagged the application. It was a Thursday morning, 10 days after we'd announced our Series B round publicly, the first time Meridian's name and scale had appeared in the press in any significant way. The TechCrunch piece ran with a headline I'd approved reluctantly. Meridian Analytics so Priya Nair built a $180 million company you've never heard of. That was on purpose. I was in back-to-back calls from 8 until 11. When I came out, Nadia was standing at my office door with a printed document and an expression I'd learned to read over 4 years. Carefully neutral, eyes slightly wider than usual. "Something came through HR you should see," she said. He placed it on my desk. It was a resume. Standard format, clean enough. The name at the top was Divya Nair. The email address was one I recognized from family group chats. The application was for Senior Marketing Manager, a role we'd posted 3 weeks earlier. At the top of the printed page in our HR system's automated font in red, referred to CO for review, flagged. Surname match. Our system flagged potential conflicts of interest automatically. It had seen the name. I sat with it for a long moment. Divya had applied to Meridian Analytics. She had seen the TechCrunch article. She must have. It was the only way she would have found us. And she had gone to our careers page and submitted her resume and written a cover letter that I now read carefully. It was a good cover letter. She was a good writer. She always had been. The cover letter did not mention me. It did not mention our family. It was addressed to the Meridian Analytics hiring team, and it made a professional case for her experience in brand strategy and campaign analytics, and it was objectively competitive for the role. She did not know who owned the company. Our name was different enough, and the TechCrunch piece had used my professional photo, taken at an industry conference, professional lighting, my hair up, rather than anything personal. And Divya, for all her intelligence, had apparently not read the article carefully enough to see the photo. Or had not connected it to the sister she'd last seen at a family Diwali gathering 2 years ago, who worked in tech, who was, as everyone understood, fine. I read her resume twice. Her experience was real. Her skill set was relevant. If her name had been anything else, Nadia would have routed her straight to the marketing hiring panel. I sat back and looked out the window at the city. 41 floors below, Market Street moved in its usual organized chaos. I thought about Professor Hartley's face in the doorway. I thought about Mr. Okonkwo's voice on the phone the next morning. I thought about the research proposal I had written and revised 6 times and never submitted. I thought about Divya at the dining room table in her temple blouse, hands folded, ready. And I thought, she has no idea. I called my mother that evening. Not to confront. Just to take the temperature of the room. "Priya." My mother's voice had the warmth she used when she hadn't called me in 2 months and felt it slightly. "We were just talking about you." "Were you?" I said. "Divya is applying for a new job. Something in tech. She's very excited." Pause. "She found a company in San Francisco. Very impressive apparently. Some article. You know how she is, always ambitious." I said. "I think she'd do well there. The role is marketing. Very senior." "That sounds good," I said. There was a comfortable silence of the kind that exists between people who have agreed without discussion not to know each other too well. My mother asked about my health. I asked about my father's knee. We talked for 11 minutes. I hung up and stood in my kitchen and felt something I can only describe as the particular weight of irony when it is very old and very complete. He didn't know. Neither of them knew. They had read about Meridian Analytics and discussed it as something exciting for Divya, and it had not occurred to them, not once apparently, to connect it to me. That told me something I had suspected for a long time. Not that they were cruel people. They were not cruel. They were simply people for whom I had never fully materialized. I was background. I was fine. I was the daughter who landed on her feet. I made a decision. I would not call Divya. I would not alert my parents. I would let the process proceed and I would handle it correctly. The next morning I called Nadia into my office. I told her to route Divya's application through the standard process. First round with HR, second round with the marketing panel, and to flag it for my attention before any offer or rejection went out. Do you want to know how she performs? Nadia asked. Yes, I said. Evaluate her honestly. Don't weight it either direction. Nadia nodded. She had been with me long enough to understand that I would handle this when I needed to handle it, and that her job was to give me clean information, not to protect me from it. The process took 3 weeks. Divya, I learned, was good. Not perfect for the role. Her analytics background was shallower than we needed at the senior level. But she was a strong communicator, she understood brand positioning, and she had a particular skill for translating technical concepts into accessible language that was, genuinely, not easy to find. The marketing panel ranked her second of 7 candidates. Their recommendation was to move forward with the top candidate but to keep Divya as a strong alternate if the first declined. I read the panel's notes. I sat with them for a day. Then I asked Nadia to schedule a call. Not with HR. With Divya directly. The call was on a Wednesday morning. I used my direct line. Nadia had told Divya only that someone from Meridian leadership wanted to speak with her regarding her application. Standard language for an executive-level touchpoint. Divya picked up on the second ring. Hello, this is Divya Nair. Divya, I said. It's Priya. A silence that lasted approximately 4 seconds. Priya. Yes. Another silence. I waited. I had learned over years of difficult conversations in boardrooms and investor meetings that the person who fills silence first is usually the one who's less comfortable with it. I was comfortable with it. I don't, she stopped. You work at Meridian. I'm the CEO, I said. I founded it 6 years ago. I could hear her breathing change. Not dramatically. Divya had always had composure, but the rhythm shifted. A recalibration. I didn't know, she said finally. I know you didn't. The article, I saw the photo but I didn't. She stopped again. Mom and Dad have been talking about Meridian for 2 weeks. They think it's a great opportunity for me. I know, I said. Mom told me. Another silence. When Divya spoke again, her voice had a quality I had almost never heard from her. Something careful, almost stripped. Why are you calling me yourself? Because your application came to my desk and I thought you deserved to know before an offer or a rejection went out. Not from an HR email. From me. She was quiet. I heard her exhale. Are you going to reject me? I looked out the window. The city again. The light that afternoon was the particular gold of San Francisco in October, the kind that makes everything look like it's in the last act of something. Your panel review was strong, I said. You rank second. You're a good marketer, Divya. You always were good at presenting things. She absorbed the subtext of that without comment. He was smart enough. She always had been. The role as posted is a level above your analytics experience, I continued. We'd need to structure it differently if you joined. More brand-weighted, less analytics. That's not ideal for the team's current needs. So it's a no. I'm telling you the honest assessment, I said. I'm also telling you that there's a marketing strategist role opening next quarter that is a direct match for your background. If you want to be considered for it, your panel notes will carry forward. A long pause. Why would you do that? She asked. Her voice was not aggressive. It was genuinely asking. I thought about how to answer that. There were several true answers. The truest one was the simplest. Because you're good at your job, I said. And because I'm not our parents. The silence after that was different from the others. Not empty. Full of something neither of us had a clean word for. Priya, she said, and her voice had something in it I hadn't heard since we were children. Something without performance. I didn't know what they did with the scholarship. I didn't find out until I was already in the program. Mom told me it had been offered to me directly. I didn't know Mr. Okonkwo had nominated you. I had not expected this. I sat with it for a moment. When did you find out? I asked. Third month, she said. Professor Hartley asked me about my transit research. I didn't know what he was talking about. He looked confused. He said the nomination file had included a research proposal on urban transit modeling. I hadn't written anything like that. Pause. I knew it was yours. I didn't say anything. I didn't know how to. I stared at the window for a long time. You stayed in the program, I said. I know. Her voice was quiet. Not defensive. I know. You left after 14 months. Yes. Did you leave because of that? Pause. Partly. Felt I wasn't the right person for it. The research. I always knew that. But saying it would have meant saying everything else. I nodded to myself in the empty office. Mom and Dad, I said. They still don't know, she said. That I knew. That I left because of it. A breath. They think I pivoted strategically. Of course they do, I said. We were quiet together for a moment. It was not comfortable exactly. But it was honest, which is different. I spent 6 years building something, I said finally. Not to prove anything to them. I want to be clear about that. I built it because it was worth building. I know, she said. And then quietly, I've known that about you since you were 11 and you rebuilt Dad's computer and he told everyone it was the technician. I almost laughed. I hadn't thought about that in 15 years. Divya, I said. I'm going to tell you something and I want you to hear it clearly. I don't have anything to settle with you. You were 17. You didn't build the situation. And your resume is good. Okay, she said. But I won't hire you to fix something between us. If you work here because the role matches and the panel approves and you can do the job. That's the only way it works. I understand, she said. And she did, I could hear it. The strategist role opens in January. I'll have Nadia send you the spec when it posts. Okay. And Divya. Yes. Tell Mom and Dad about the call. Don't let them find out some other way. Pause. What do I tell them? The truth, I said. That their daughter runs the company. She told them that evening. Nadia found out because my mother called our main company line the following morning, asked for me by my first name in the way mothers do regardless of circumstance, and Nadia, magnificent Nadia, transferred her to voicemail with the professional calm of someone who had handled far worse. My mother left a message. It was 4 minutes long. It covered, in order, surprise, pride, confusion about why I hadn't told them, more pride, some suggestions about the timing of announcements, and a closing statement that I was and had always been her most resilient daughter. I listened to it twice. Resilient. I did not call back that day. I sat with James and Camille for our weekly leadership sync, where we talked about Q4 pipeline and a potential Series C conversation and a hire we needed to make in enterprise sales. James brought coffee from the place on Folsom that I'd been going to since the seed round days, when we couldn't afford the good stuff and now went there out of loyalty. Camille had a new blazer she'd bought for a board presentation and wanted opinions. I told her it was exactly right, which it was. After the meeting, I sat alone for a while. My father called at 7 that evening. He had waited until after dinner, which was how he handled things he needed to compose himself around. His voice, when I answered, was careful in a way I had almost never heard from him. Priya, he said. Divya told us. I know, I said. A long pause. I didn't know you were building a company. I know. You never said. No, I said. I didn't. Another pause. I should have, with Professor Hartley. I should have. He stopped. He was not a man who finished sentences like that. He had not built the vocabulary for them. Dad, I said. Not to stop him. Just to let him know I was there. I'm proud of you, he said. The words landed somewhere they had never landed before. Not because they were new, he had said versions of them over the years about minor things, but because this time I could hear the weight in them, the understanding of how long they should have come. Thank you, I said. I meant it. Fully. And I also felt in the same moment, the permanent nature of 6 years of silence, of a dining table in December, of a research proposal on urban transit modeling that I had revised 6 times and that had never been read by the person it was meant for. Pride from my father at 31 with a $180 million company was real, and it was also 6 years late, and those two things would always both be true simultaneously. That is what I mean when I say a costly victory. You can win something and still carry the shape of what you lost. Divya applied for the strategist role in January. She went through the standard process. The panel ranked her first. I approved the hire. Nadia processed the paperwork. Divya started on a Monday and was good at her job. Precise, creative, collaborative in the specific way that comes from someone who has something to prove to themselves rather than anyone else. She and I were professional with each other in the way people are when they're building something new on top of something complicated. We had lunch once in March at a place near the office. We talked about work mostly. At the end she said, "Thank you for the honest answer." On the call. "You didn't need a favor," I said. "You needed the information." She nodded. I know the difference now. I believe she did. My parents visited San Francisco in April, the first time they'd come since I'd moved here 8 years ago. My father spent 20 minutes in the lobby looking at everything very carefully, the way engineers look at things they're trying to understand structurally. My mother asked Nadia if she could take a photo of us in front of the company sign, and Nadia, who is a person of deep professional grace and subtle warmth, said of course and took 3. We had dinner at a restaurant I liked. Not the most expensive one, just the best one, which is different. My father ordered carefully and asked thoughtful questions about the business that surprised me with their specificity. My mother talked too much and said the right things for the wrong reasons and said the wrong things for reasons she genuinely didn't understand, which was simply who she was. At one point my father put down his fork and said, "You should have told us." I looked at him. Would it have changed anything? He was quiet for a moment. "I don't know," he said. And because it was honest, I respected it. "I'm telling you now," I said. He nodded. My mother reached across the table and took my hand and said, "You were always our resilient one," and I chose, deliberately as an act of grace rather than agreement, to receive it as what she meant rather than what it had cost. We finished dinner. They took a car to their hotel. I walked back to my apartment through the October dark, past the coffee shop on Folsom, past the old WeWork we'd outgrown in year 2, past the city that had held 6 years of quiet work. I thought about Mr. Okonkwo, who had written me recommendations for every program and fellowship and grant I'd applied for over 6 years and who had sent me a brief note when the TechCrunch article came out that said only, "I knew. Congratulations." Oh. I thought about James, who had been there for the 11 client year and the 43 client year and the $47 million morning, and who still made the same terrible coffee jokes he'd made at the orientation hackathon when we were 18. I thought about Camille, who understood that a company is also a community and that I had spent 6 years building both. I thought about Nadia, who had handed me a glass of water on the day we closed our Series B and had simply been present. I thought about Divya. In her first week learning the system, putting in the work. And I thought about the girl who had stood in a doorway in December and smiled to keep her face in a shape she could control, and had gone back upstairs and had decided in the quiet of her bedroom not to wait for anyone to open the door. She had built her own. I don't tell this story to frame my family as villains. They were not villains. They were people with a story about who I was, and they held that story with the particular certainty of people who love you and therefore feel entitled to define you. I tell it because there is a version of my life in which I spent all 6 of those years trying to correct that story, arguing with it, performing for an audience that wasn't watching. I didn't. I built instead. That's the only answer I have to offer. Not a formula, not a strategy, just the practical recognition that the people who are waiting to be validated before they begin will wait forever. Begin in the dark. Build what you can see. Let the rest find you when it's ready. It will find you.